Malkia had put as much effort as could be reasonably expected into her appearance for the day. While ceremony insisted that she remain with the hideous purple robes of her people, she had gone all out with her hair's curls, facial powder, earrings, the loveliest necklace she could find, and even had jewels embedded in her teeth. It was a procedure normally not done in Psycho, but as common as it was in Electro, she found it quite appropriate. Malkia might even keep them. They were prettier than she'd thought they'd be, in spite of what her parents might think. She smirked. Malkia had been tested, fully recognized as an adult under the law of the Order of the Psychomancers. What they wanted was now significantly less relevant. Although she still hadn't brought herself to ask them about what she had learned in the testing ritual, her parents had been expectantly overjoyed to learn about her success, and insisted right away that, seeing as it was not long before the yearly celebration, she accept any invitations that arrived. They decided to let her alone, even though they'd be there. It was supposed to represent her sudden maturity. One would have thought they didn't do it all the time. Anyway, Malkia found herself in the capital city of Electro for the Festival of New Power. They held it every year for Mancers from every nation that wasn't currently at war with another Mancer nation to celebrate the fact that they had just been tested that year, or after the last year their nation was allowed. Although it was held every year, and always in Electro if the political situation allowed it, Malkia had never been. She always felt this was for the newly tested, and thus, although she usually tried to get invited to every important social gathering possible, of course, she decided to avoid it until she could count herself among that group. Now she could, and it felt wondrous. The renowned wonders of Electro were everything people claimed they'd be. Metal carts that moved by themselves, lamps that had no fire yet shine brighter than anything not made by a photomancer, devices that one could talk into and have one's voice come out miles away. All of this worked without magic. If there was a way to generate electricity without electromancy, then even sectons could build these things. Yeah, right. Malkia laughed at the idea of those freaks building anything worthwhile. As she stepped off the moving cart, still astounded by its abilities, into the metallic sheer of the city, she stood up to present the most dignified pose possible before it was utterly ruined by a clumsy Dracomancer. Vorf was admiring the trapezoidal carvings in the metal buildings as he walked. While it was the standard shape of southern Mansa, that was usually because it was easier to fit local stones together that way. Electro and Farah both made their buildings out of metal. They only had these designs as a show of solidarity and unity with the other nations, and it amazed him that they would go out of their way to do such a thing. Of course, that really didn't work with Cryo or Geo, but those are special cases. Cryo built things out of wood and animal skin, because it was an easier resource to find there, and in circular and conical design, so the snow would slide off rather than the rectangles everyone else preferred. The people of Geo, of course, built their homes with magic, so they could design it however they wanted. Vorf wasn't particularly into architecture, but he did find the reasons behind the different building designs to be quite fascinating, so one has to bear with him. So enamored by this wonderful imagery was he that he didn't even notice the cart stopping and the Psychomancer girl getting off. Imbecile! She thought. Malkia did not have much to go on to make an accurate guess about the Dracomancer's intelligence, but she was convinced he was at least lacking attentiveness, if not outright stupid. Glancing over him as he helped her get back to her, while stammering what she was pretty sure were supposed to be apologies, his appearance gave her nothing to change her mind. His body was average as build, his clothes were just the standard Draco cloak and nothing special added on. He had none of the tattoos most Mancer males use to mark their station in life. His hair was an unkempt mess, and though she wouldn't admit he wasn't bad-looking, nothing in his face expressed strength, or cunning, or wisdom, or anything worth noting. Of all the things for me to run into, this is what I get? Oh, tormented, he thought, trying to remember his etiquette and help the girl up, and trying to figure out which apology apology to go with and somehow failing all of them, Vorf barely had time to think anything about the girl he had just run into. What he did notice was that she was a psychomancer, that everything she wore beyond the standard robes of psycho was pink, and that she was rather made up and bejeweled. Her teeth and ears were both pierced, but she didn't have any of the facial piercings most wealthy women had. He suspected that said something about her social class, for the amount of makeup and the effort put into the jewelry she did have seemed to indicate meticulous care. Vorf stopped noticing her ornaments when he noticed her eyes, however. They were angry, almost furious, which he would have suspected, but for reasons he did not quite comprehend, he could almost feel stronger emotions behind them. There was danger there, and disgust. Even without staring into them, he felt belittled and inferior by just their presence. Was this a psychomancer trick? You should leave, she said quite simply, not accepting his apology as she stood straight and dusted herself off. Reason indicated that Vorf should listen to her. He didn't know her, he had knocked her down, and he had no real reason to care about what happened next with her. Walking away and saying nothing seemed to be the best option by all logic. Yet, when Vorf had looked into her eyes, he felt as if he were nothing. Tormented, he had faced down a dragon. He was far from nothing. This was a ceremony he had earned, and unlike her, he saw good friends die to get it. He was not about to let some upstart, rude, psychomancer witch talk to him that way. Why? I wronged you, and I apologize, but a simple accident such as the one that just happened doesn't warrant this behavior. Shock flashed in the psychomancer's face. She recomposed herself so quickly that most might have missed it, but it was there. Vorf had gotten through her defenses, and a part of him enjoyed that more than he should. One of the proper techniques for dealing with the Battle Social Station, Malka had learned, could very well be to just walk away. Considering that what she wanted most at the moment was to put some distance between herself and this disgusting lizard, now seemed to be one of those moments. I have neither the desire nor the time to listen to you throw a tantrum. With that, she turned away and left him with the most graceful movements she could muster. People can be so entitled. Probably some Dracomancer noble brat, or someone raised on the idea that they are just as good as those above them. Silly boy, if you want to be just as good or better than your so-called superiors, then you need to act the part. Regardless of what happened with the Dracomancer boy, Malka was determined to engage in the festivities. The high chieftains of each order were going to be here. Yes, of course, she would only be one in an enormous crowd of young mancers hoping to impress their masters with some witty remark or gesture they were stupid to not think the others hadn't seen 1,000 times before. That was why she would be speaking with her servants while the other idiots went for the master. Though completely worthless in discussions of almost anything else worth discussing, from history to foreign policy to the sciences, Magicless were wonderful gossips when it came to the mancers they knew. Handless were even better, though she knew to never allow herself to be caught speaking to one of them in public. Think of what it could do to her reputation. No, it would be best to chat up the Magicless that catered to the High Chief's whims, something she knew only a small throng of ambitious mancers would even think about. As always, those others' ignorance would play right into Malka's hands. Vorf had always had two ambitions in life. Well, since he was old enough to establish a reasonable plan rather than dreaming of imitating whichever job the hero in the last story he read had been part of anyway, he would either be a historian or a priest. The first would have him roaming through the archives for lost texts from ages past, arguing over subtle linguistic differences that other analysts had overlooked, and discovering the mysteries of how Mansa came to be what it was today. The second would have him studying the ways of Akamar, sharing those ways with the rest of the world, trying to understand the gifts they all took from the fallen gods, and facilitating relations between the Mancers and the Magicless. Both fascinated him. a lifetime dedicated to study with a bit of service. It would satisfy him more than any of the other paths he thought he could take, with less downsides as far as he could perceive. Anyway, everyone he talked to about this festival told him roughly the same thing. If you have a goal for adulthood, start laying the foundation. Everyone who has the political clout to make things happen in Mansa will be there. If you're smart, you'll befriend one of them. Now, Vorf knew that his ambitions need not involve the High Chiefs, and that practically everyone would be trying to impress them anyways, so he didn't even bother looking for where they might be staying. Instead, in between watching the various light show competitions between the pyromancers and the photomancers, trying all sorts of sugar-coated things that he never would have thought to coat in sugar, and dodging his countrymen dancing around drunkenly and wearing pieces of forest dragon skeletons on their backs, it seemed to thoroughly shame the foreign men who were confined to bear skeletons and bird feathers. Worf kept his ear to the ground to see where the religious leaders, historical societies, and educators, as they were often associated with at least one of the two, were celebrating. "I want to tear them all apart," his companion noted angrily, staring at the festivities from inside the abandoned building they had chosen to wait in. Lizard glanced at the geomancer beside him. While he hadn't met the boy before, the kid seemed unstable. Supposedly something had gone wrong with his testing, and the Order of the Geomancers had tried to dispose of him. Lizard understood why he wouldn't want to talk about it. He also understood, without knowing the details, just how brutally the Order went about fixing their little embarrassment. The thought of what those monsters were capable of made the jolts that leapt from his untested electromancer hands or his arms and occasionally down his body bearable. He wasn't going to be tested, and he wasn't going to be handless. Whatever the effects of staying untested for too long were, they were better than submission. Lizard had to admit, though, it was unfortunate that the effects weren't just propaganda to justify the orders as he had once suspected. The sudden pain in his arms, as if his hand were turning his electromancer back on himself, attested to that. That was irrelevant, however. What was relevant was the mission, and he needed to make sure the geomancers stayed focused. They could work out their collective issues on the crowd when making the distraction, but for now they needed to remember that they were two effectively untested mancers in a city filled with some of those powerful of their race, and they could not mess this up. This needed to work.